When my father died, I was waiting for grief. I was waiting for long nights, silent mornings, and for this deafening pain that you feel when someone you love is no longer there. What I was not expecting was betrayal, not from a stranger, but from my own family. You know, people always say that death brings families together. That's not what happened to mine, not even close. The day everything changed, I remember standing in front of my childhood house. The cold air was biting my skin through my jacket. My skin was pale, despite the cold. I had a knot in my stomach that refused to come undone. Something was wrong, but I could not name it. Inside, behind these walls, my brothers and sisters were laughing, and I was not invited. My name is Emily. I am 33 years old, and until then, I thought I had at least one place in my family. I was never the beloved child. Not like Rachel, my older sister, who always had this magnetic force that made people listen to her. Or Daniel, my little brother who played security and remained silent, which somehow allowed him to stay in the good graces of everyone. I was the one who left. The one who did not follow the rules. The one who followed his own path and paid the price, but Dad was different. With him, I did not need to explain myself. I could just be, and towards the end, when he fell ill, I came back. I dropped everything. I left my apartment and my job in the city, and I came back to take care of him, and I do not regret a second. These last months with him, they were slow, painful, beautiful. Some mornings, he could not speak, and other days, he did not stop. He told me stories about his childhood, how he had met Mom, how scared he was when Rachel was born, because he did not yet know how to be a father, and he smiled when he talked about me. The way I had surprised him. The way I saw the world differently. There was this moment, I remember it very well, when we were sitting on the back porch, listening to the wind rustling in the trees. He turned to me, his voice, and said, "Emily, there is something that I want you to keep safe. Promise me, okay?" He handed me a small sealed envelope. It was heavy in my hand, as if it contained something more than just a piece of paper. I told him what it was, but he just made me smile, soft and tired. "Just the right time, give it to him, Albert." It was our lawyer. I kept this envelope. I put it in the drawer next to my bed. I never opened it. I never even thought about it again. Because at the time, I still hoped it would get better. I was not ready to think about goodbyes, and then he left. No dramatic end, just a quiet night. He closed his eyes and never opened them again. I sat there, holding his hand, long after the nurse confirmed them, trying to feel something. Whatever. But I was fatigued. I thought the hardest thing in my father's loss would be the silence he left behind him. But that was not the case. It was the noise I heard a few days later coming from the house. Rachel's voice, high and mocking, floated through the open window while I was frozen on the porch. "She doesn't deserve a penny," said she, laughing. "In the end, we got everything. My throat tightened. My hands trembled. My heart did not break. It collapsed. I was no longer alone in mourning, now I was angry. And while I was taking a step forward, something changed in me. I was no longer entering this house as a sister or forgotten, and because in my pocket was this envelope and what it contained. It was going to change everything. I remember entering this house, the house of my childhood, and realizing how much I loved strangers. She felt the same thing, this mixture of old wood, light coffee and lavender pottery that my mother used to scatter around. But something in her was colder, sharper. As if it was no longer mine. As if I had been erased. Rachel and Daniel were in the living room lying on the sofas, as if they had not buried our father 2 weeks earlier. Their glasses of wine were tinted, while they were wearing a toast to something I was not supposed to hear, something I will never forget. "She does not deserve a penny." This voice, that of Rachel, pierced me. I had not seen her since the funeral. She did not hold me in her arms. At that moment, she barely looked at me. I thought the grief made people distant. But now I saw her for what she really was. She was not in mourning, she was celebrating. I slowly backed away, my heart beating against my ribs, as if it wanted to escape. I did not want to give them the satisfaction of knowing that I had heard them, not yet. Instead, I eclipsed myself and drove. Nowhere in particular, just far away. Trying to breathe. Trying to think. My mind was constantly spinning around the same question. Why didn't they invite me to the will reading? Why did I suddenly become invisible? Why was I treated like I didn't belong in a family I had given so much to? But deep down, I already knew the answer. I had always been the outsider. Growing up, Rachel was the golden child, perfect grades, prom queen, debate captain, the pride of the family and my mother's favorite. Daniel was the peacemaker. He was calm, pleasant, always knew when to shake his head and avoid trouble. And then there was me. I was different. I loved books more than people. But I questioned the things that were not supposed to be. I did not run after the spotlights, and maybe that made it easy for me to ignore. Or maybe it was a threat to me. Rachel hated that Dad and I were close. I saw it in his eyes every time he chose me to go shopping with him or asked me to help him in the garage. She showed her smile, but her jaw creaked. Her compliments always had a little point hidden inside. "You are so pragmatic, Emily," she said. "It's cute how we settle for simple things." I wondered if I wasn't imagining it. If I was maybe too sensitive. But after that day, hearing her say those words, "She doesn't deserve a penny," I realized that it had never been in my head. It was real. And it had always been there. The truth is that when Dad fell ill, no one else took over. Rachel was too busy. She said, important meetings. Daniel came sometimes, but it was always fast. He brought soup, sent flowers, and left before the silence became too heavy. But I stayed. I prepared his meals. I sat next to him when the pain kept him from sleeping at night. I held his hand when he couldn't form words anymore. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because I loved him. And he knew it. That's why he gave me the envelope that night. Once the shock had passed and the anger turned into something more vivid, the determination. I took it out of my drawer. My hands were shaking when I opened it, my breath stopping when I saw the legal headband and fat William J. Clark's will. The date first caught my attention. It had been signed 3 weeks before his death. My thumb accelerated. It wasn't the same will that Rachel and Daniel had seen. This one looked new. I put my fingers on his signature. It was real. It was him. And that meant that something had changed. I didn't know what was going to happen, not yet. But I was sure of one thing. That I was no longer going to be invisible. I had to read this will a dozen times that night. Every word, every clause, every signature. It wasn't just a copy. It was official. Stamped. Notarized, attested. My father hadn't just scribbled something on his deathbed. He had planned everything, reflected. He had correctly classified it and, more importantly, he had hidden it from everyone. Everyone except me. I didn't sleep. I was just sitting there, in my children's room. The same pale blue walls, the same crack in the ceiling that I fixed when I had trouble falling asleep when I was little. Except that now, this room didn't seem safe to me. They would have set a safe full of secrets, and I was the only one to have the key. The next morning, I brought the will to Albert, our longtime lawyer, specialized in family law. He was surprised to see me. He obviously didn't expect me to show up. His expression changed the moment I extended the envelope to him. He opened it carefully, adjusting his glasses while browsing the pages. I watched him like a hawk, each breath tightened in my chest. Then he raised his eyes wide open. "This is dated according to the one I read with your brothers and sisters," he said gently. "It changes a lot of things." This sentence made me feel like an electric discharge. He asked me where I got it. I told him the truth. My father had just given it to me just in case. And I hadn't even known what it was until last night. Mr. Allard shook his head slowly, as if things were finally beginning to take place. Then he said something that I will never forget. "Emily, here is the valid will." My ears were buzzing. All this guilt that I had in me, thinking that maybe I wasn't supposed to be, even that maybe I had done something wrong, had disappeared. Replaced by clarity, by anger, by fire. They had tried to put me aside. But Dad hadn't. He made sure I had what I needed. He knew how to distort things. He knew Rachel. And now I had something stronger than revenge. I had the truth. Later in the day, I received a call from Daniel. No Rachel, never Rachel. Daniel was just doing what he always did, limiting the damage. His voice was tense, as if he was trying to seem relaxed, but he couldn't really do it. "Hey, I was just taking your news. We're finalizing things with the succession today. Rachel thought it would be better if you didn't come. I could almost see him scratching his neck, avoiding any visual contact, even on the phone. It would be better if I didn't come. It was their plan. To erase me in silence. To pretend I had never been there. I forced myself to smile, which he couldn't see. No problem, I said calmly. Come on guys. I'll see you soon. My heart was beating like crazy, but my voice was firm. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control, not by spite, but by something deeper, just a poidiocast. He was at home. At Dad's, for the last signatures. The last step before Rachel could claim control of everything. The accounts, the land, the family business. She must have thought she had won. That her lies had been sealed by a lawyer's stamp. But she didn't know what I had. She didn't know that the truth was going to break through that front door. As I was walking down the aisle, I saw Rachel through the window, doing the 100 steps. Animated, Daniel was leaning on the papers. A pen in hand. Halliard was sitting stiff on the sofa. I took a deep breath. I slipped the steering wheel into the pocket of my coat. My fingers trembled, but no fear, nor adrenaline, not of anything that seemed dangerously close to justice. And then I opened the door. The air inside the house was heavy, tense. Loaded. As if she were holding her breath. Rachel was in the middle of a sentence when the door closed behind me. Her voice weakened. The moment she saw me there, her eyes were closed and her lips pressed into this familiar and condescending smile. As if I were a stray dog who had gone astray from the garden. "Well," she said, barely concealing her annoyance. It's embarrassing. Daniel raised his eyes from the low table, where the last documents of succession were carefully stacked. His eyes went from me to Rachel, then again. He didn't say anything. Of course he didn't. But Elliot? He got up. His gaze landed on the inner pocket of my coat. As if he knew what I had brought with me, his jaw slightly tightened. And for a fraction of a second I saw something on his face. Relief. Maybe even respect. Rachel grinned. You were not invited, Emily. I smiled, slowly and deliberately, like someone who finally has a winning hand. Yeah, I said. I understood it when I heard you say that I didn't deserve a penny. His jaw contracted. You listened to the doors. I took a few steps forward and gently placed the thick envelope on the table, just above their precious stack of papers. No, I said calmly. I was in mourning. But I'm done with that now. Daniel finally spoke in an uncertain voice. What is that? I looked Rachel straight in the eyes when I answered. Dad's true will. The silence that followed seemed endless to me. Rachel burst into laughter. A high and forced sound resonated too loudly in the silence. It's pathetic, she said dryly. You expect someone to believe that you have just found a second will that came out of nowhere. She turned to Emma Leard, expecting him to support her. But he didn't. He widened his throat, adjusted his glasses, and took the envelope with expert caution. In fact, he said, Emily brought it to me earlier in the day. It was 3 weeks before your father's death. Notary witness. Rachel's face became pale. Her narcotic smile disappeared. And for once, she had nothing to say. Daniel bent forward, looking at the signature. Wait, is that really his writing? Emma Leard shook her head. I've already checked its authenticity. It will also replace the one we examined last week. Rachel remained frozen. Her mouth was open, then closed again. We would have said she was going to scream or cry. Maybe both. But I stayed there, looking at her. I was no longer angry. I was no longer afraid. I was fed up. It was about being reduced to silence. Excluded. Treated as if I didn't matter. To see them transform their grief into cupidity. And to decide that I would not let them rewrite the story that my father had left behind him. Emma Leard began to read the New Testament aloud, and as her voice resonated in the room, I saw Rachel begin to collapse. 80% of the sequence had to be transferred to Emily Clark. She didn't agree. The file of the chair, as if it needed to stabilize. Daniel seemed too clumsy to move. The remaining part had to be kept in a fiducie egg with Emily as an executive, and distributed at her discretion. Rachel's eyes widened towards me and panicked. You can't do that. But her voice sounded hollow now. As if she already knew she had lost. I looked her in the eyes. I did nothing. Dad did it. And at that moment I realized that it was not revenge. It was justice. There was something strange about the way time passed at that moment. Everything slowed down. I stayed there, watching Rachel as the words of the testament were deposited in the room like ashes. No one said anything. No one could. It was as if we were all frozen, caught between disbelief and recognition. It was real. My father had chosen me. Albert was again enlightened. The throat, his voice equal, was firm. Let's continue to read aloud. I, William J. Clark, saint of spirit and body, evoke by the present all the testaments and previous testaments. Rachel's hand rose. Her voice broke like glass under the pressure. This is not good. He told me that I would be in command. He promised it. Her eyes were now crazy. She was no longer playing. She was not calm. She was collapsing. You must have falsified that. There is no chance that he has changed, not without telling me. I stayed silent. Let wisdom. My reading did not do it. Very wisely. The signature corresponds to all legal documents. It was verified. Emma Clark. Daniel finally spoke. I did not know that he planned to change anything. He looked at me as if I were a stranger. Maybe he always thought that I was weaker, calmer, easier to ignore. But not anymore. Now I had all their attention. And none of this looked like a victory. It looked like the truth, brutal and heavy, finally speaking louder than all the manipulations he had preceded. Rachel turned to me. The low, venomous voice. You had planned this. You were going to play the sweet and loyal girl, while we clapped in the back. I felt my breath stop for a second, not out of guilt, but out of pure absurdity. She still had not understood. You have not been stabbed, I say gently. We saw you as you are. Finally. His lips crossed. Dad did not even like the confrontation. He would not do that to me. Not unless someone pushes him. I approached. My calm but sharp voice. Dad saw you arrive late, leave early, raise your eyes to the sky when he needed help to go to the bathroom. He heard you joking about the inheritance while he was dying. Rachel, you did that. You gave him every reason to change his mind. The room was silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to have stopped. And then Albert dug into his briefcase and took out a letter from Bame. One more thing, he says. Your father asked me to give this to Emily when the will would be read. He slowly extended it to me. My hands were shaking when I unfolded the page. My father's writing, trembling but still familiar, stretched on the paper with blue ink. Emily. If you read this, it means I'm gone and you had the courage to do what I couldn't do. You have always been the one who stayed when no one else did, you never asked for anything. But I want you to have everything I can give you. Not because of blood or an obligation, because you deserve it, and because I trust you that it makes sense. With all my love, Dad. I did not realize that I was crying until the tear fell on the signature at the bottom of the letter. For a moment, no one moved. Rachel sat down, defeated. Daniel seemed to be about to speak, but he didn't. He had nothing more to say. The truth fell. The story was no longer up to them to distort it. It was up to me. And my father had made sure that she stayed. After that day, everything changed, but not the way I had imagined it. Rachel tried to fight. Of course she did. She contested the will, dragged us into desperate judicial inquiries to prove that he was wrong, but she didn't win. She couldn't. The truth was there, too solid. Too real. Finally, even his lawyer advised him to drop it. Daniel sent me an email a few weeks later, short, clumsy, but honest. He said he didn't know that the will had been modified, that it was not part of Rachel's plan to exclude me. That he was sorry. I believed him. Not because I trusted him entirely, but because I think so. I think guilt has the gift of waking people up. We don't talk about it much anymore now, but it happens that they hear about it. He even came to the house once, without complaining, just to sit with me in the kitchen and talk about Dad. It was calm. It was uncomfortable. But it was something. Rachel, on the other hand, has disappeared. She packed her bags and left the city. No excuse, no call. Not even a text. I haven't heard from her since the court statute in my favor. Part of me is still waiting for the next show, the next letter, the next explosion. But honestly, part of me hopes to never hear her voice again. It's strange, however. I thought that getting the inheritance would be like winning. Don't get me wrong, Dad left me enough things to change my life. The house, the business, the savings. I could have sold everything, started over, from scratch. I thought about it more than once. But every time I stood in front of the front door, the keys in my hand, ready to leave, I couldn't, because this house, this land, was my father's inheritance. And now it was mine. So instead, I stayed. I renovated the house little by little, piece by piece. I planted a garden where he used to sit on the porch. I transformed his old workshop into a community space for local artists, something he always wanted, but never had time to do. And I created a stock exchange in his name. For children who feel invisible, children like me. Because that's what no one talks about when it comes to inheritance. It's not just a question of money or property. What I want is for their memory to be deformed into something ugly. My father was not perfect, but he was nice. And he believed in me when no one else did. This second will was not just a simple document. It was a message. Do subscribe.